We turn now to our Right of Way series. When people talk about the tense relationship between cars and bikes, they tend to assume that everyone who rides has the same perspective. But when we brought 6 people into the WGBH studios to talk with Reilly, it quickly became clear that not all bikers think alike.
So let me start at the outset just by asking all of you how safe you feel as cyclists riding in the Boston area.
Safer than the suburbs.
Really?
Yep. Speeds are a lot lower.
Yeah, I mean, I ride all the time in the city, and I feel pretty safe about what's going on. And perennially, or all the time, I would have people say, "Get off the road." That'd be, yelling out the window at me. And that hasn't happened in a few months. So, I think people are getting used to more bikes being in the cities.
I have occasionally felt like drivers viewed me as a nuisance, but I haven't felt any hostility. And I've been really impressed, actually, with drivers' awareness.
I think that awareness in the city isn't enough. I think that the city's doing a lot, both Cambridge and Boston are doing a lot to create bike lanes and to make bikes feel safer, but the problem is that that doesn't prevent cars from running red lights or running yellow lights or going into the bike lanes to make that right turn.
On Seaver Street, I was hit by a car about a month ago. I was biking on the right side of the road, and a car came up from behind, didn't see me, and struck me in my arm. My arm's still a little bruised about a month later, but I broke his side view mirror, so.
Did it knock you off the bike?
It did. It did, yeah. I got knocked off my bike and was thrown into a snowbank. And luckily, it was the last day that there were snowbanks.
I feel a lot safer in the suburbs, and the reason is simply because the roads are wide, and there's plenty of space. And when I get into the city, I mean, maybe it's driver aggression, but I think it's just tighter. There's just not as much space.
Some panelists said tension with cars can be exacerbated by bad cyclist behavior.
We're allowed to ride 2 abreast, but if there's traffic, we're supposed to single up. And too often I ride with groups where everybody doesn't. And if you're not sort of the alpha rider in that pack, it's hard to get a cyclist who's behaving poorly to behave well. And we know it's putting the rest of us at risk if we do something like run a red light. You see one cyclist who runs a red light, 10 cars see it, and there's this compounding effect of all cyclists are bad.
Well, my neighborhood, more people are riding on the sidewalk or riding the wrong way up the traffic.
Yes.
And that there's no education there for them. And they're, imminently, the statistics say they're way more at risk riding on the sidewalk.
Sometimes I just sit there and wish they would send you guys all to Holland to see how it can be done in a civilized manner, right? I'm trying really hard to get along with you guys, and I try to give you space. I try to follow the rules. I expect bicyclists to follow the rules and not jump up on me, cross in front of me at red, come against the traffic without lights in the evening, stuff like that.
But asking bikes and cars to follow the same rules may be asking too much.
Some of the actual setup of the roads puts us in a position where it's very difficult to be safe while following all the rules. So, for instance, there's a great deal of bike lanes that are not wide enough to keep you out of the door lane. So, in order to prevent myself from being hit by a door, I'll frequently be blocking traffic.
So if the roads are imperfect and the rules are flawed, what's the best way to keep the peace?
There's a lot of police on bikes. Have them ride around the city.
That's a good
Cars
idea.
respect cyclists. It would help cyclists stop for lights.
And train officers.
Yeah, I think it would help.
It would also allow an officer presence in some areas where it's difficult to have
because I do find that when there's cyclists following, like stopping for lights and being careful, there's like a social effect. And other people are like, oh, maybe I should stop too.
Or maybe deeper change is needed.
It seems to be that the words that we're using, that cars are entitled to the road and, cars ought to give cyclists the right of way or whatever. But in reality is, they're brothers and sisters on the road, Both people, both, units have equal access to the road. And for too long, the presumption has been that the cars own the road, or the cars at least more entitled to the road than cyclists.
For what it's worth, our panelists said Boston compares pretty well to other U.S. cities.
So I'm from Orlando, and I've been hit a couple of times in Orlando, just because drivers down there, it's just the Wild West. 8-lane highways, it's really rough to ride around Orlando. But compared to Orlando, Boston's definitely safer.
Still, it's hardly a cycling utopia.
I have been to Amsterdam and biked in Amsterdam to get around while I was there. And I was amazed at how relaxing it was.
Yes.
And the main difference was that there are cycle tracks that are areas, these are rights of way that are for bicycles that are separated from car traffic, and they're also separated from pedestrian traffic. So it's essentially having a place where bicycles are supposed to be.
Boston may never be that idyllic. So for now, our panelists have a few respectful requests.
Yeah, maybe
I would also say enforce the texting while driving ban, because I think a lot of people don't. So the times I've never been hit, but the times I've almost been hit is when someone turns right suddenly without signaling.
Yeah, sure.
And whenever I look, I see that they're doing this, and when they have one hand on the phone and one on the wheel, they don't signal.
Or
It's
they're
just
not
harder
seeing.
to do that.
Yeah.
And so let's enforce that too.
A PR campaign might be helpful. Don't want to fritter away money, but like the motorcycle campaign, watch motorcycles are everywhere.
Motorcycles.
It's a little bit lame, but maybe something more peppy and less intimidating, more encouraging.
The potential that a car has to injure someone, to kill someone, is so great that it would be nice if, at the very least, car drivers or people in general just thought about what it means to drive a car on the road and to get in a car accident or just to even own a car. It's potentially very dangerous, and that's a big responsibility that I don't think any car driver really takes into consideration.
For the drivers who get aggressive, you hear them, they gun their engines or whatever it is, they're thinking about something other than a human being. And if they just remembered that it could be a life I take. It's not just going to ruin my commute today, but it's something I have to live with forever. And I don't know if it's a smiley face on the back of our helmets. I always try to wave when somebody lets me in or does something like that. But making that eye contact, right? It's the communication thing. But we all have to remember that cars always win these collisions, and the drivers really don't want that either.
All right, and Adam Reilly is here. It is interesting, these perceptions, because, for instance, one of your guests said, I much prefer riding in the suburbs because the roads are much wider. Well, we did a piece last night that you did about how narrow the streets in Wellesley are, and there are no bike lanes. So there's nothing universal about this.
I think that's exactly right. And you saw with these 6 people that there were 5 of whom are current avid cyclists. The woman, Ellen Rhoda from Germany, had been previously an avid cyclist in other countries, in other parts of the U.S. But yeah, there's really no, I don't think, strong consensus about how good Boston is right now, whether things are improving or whether things are static, whether bikers who behave badly make things worse on the road, or whether it's only motorists' fault. Even about what the solution is, whether it's attitudinal changes or infrastructure changes. And there's a huge variety of opinion, which surprised me.
Well, there have been huge attitudinal changes, I think, but one of the issues that keeps coming up is making the bikers more responsible. And we've been very bike-friendly this week, so I want to turn that a little bit and say, maybe we do need to start ticketing and calling into question some of the behavior of bicyclists. Right now, the entire onus is on the driver.
Yeah, well, I think that's true for better or worse. And one thing that I think we should note is we actually tried to cast as wide a net as we could with this panel. I would have, simply for discussion purposes, I like the group we got, but it would have been great to have, half the panel composed of aggrieved motorists who never ride a bike, and then the other half composed of cyclists who would push back at them. But it was just a real challenge getting car drivers to come on and vent their frustrations. I think probably because almost everyone, the vast majority of us drive a car to work, like I do. Cyclists are an aggrieved defensive minority, so I think they're more eager to speak out.
But they're also drivers.
They are also drivers, and that was a point that some of them, made a point. Well, you could see one of our guests, Christopher Chambers, who lives in Dorchester, is probably the most hostile to cars of the group. But others made a point of saying, we see this from both perspectives. I'm a driver as well as a cyclist. I see it operating both ways. In terms of enforcement, that was the idea that came out in this panel that I think excited people most. When Matt Marks from Westwood said, well, how about we have, cops riding around the street just making sure that cyclists and motorists are behaving well, there was this sort of hum of approval from the group. And it'd be interesting to see how that would play out because, maybe we'd get more arrests for drivers running red lights. And I think you're right. I think cyclists who are used to, people who roll through stop signs, maybe they wouldn't be able to do that. That's something that even cyclists who think they're safe are justified they believe they're justified in doing that. They don't like to stop, just sort of go slowly through a stop sign, and they might not be able to do that.
All right. Adam Reilly, thank you for coming.
Thanks, Emily.
All right. Are you a biker who gets frustrated with other bikers? What do you consider bad biking behavior? Sound off on our special Right of Way Facebook page. That's at facebook.com, Right of Way 2013. And if you've missed any of our Right of Way coverage, you can see it all at WGBHnews.org Right of Way.